what kind of society do we have here in Britain? How much remains of the society I grew up in? Here's the good news right at the top. It's self-evident that tens of millions of people in this country and billions around the world would answer those questions the same way I do. It's my understanding that the society in which I grew to adulthood is still there, still intact, but that the millions who know as much have been maliciously discouraged from saying so. I'm sick of that, sick of the bullied silence. And I say, as I keep saying, that it's long past time for the billions to get angry and to act angry. So much has gone wrong here in these islands. The truth is we've stood by and let it go wrong for far, far too long. We entrusted the wrong people with our best interests. A fish rots from the head. We don't have an elected Prime Minister in this country. We have Rishi Sunak, a puppet set in place by a handful of his sellout colleagues in service of the markets and corporations. We have a leader of the so-called opposition, Keir Starmer, who only says a woman is an adult female when the focus groups tell him it seems like a good idea, for now anyway, empty as a cast-off snakeskin. And across the pond, the rot set in long ago as well. Corruption in the Biden family is laid bare. In spite of the best efforts of the colluding masters of social media, Hunter Biden's nefarious behaviour, monies received and cuts for the big guy, has been obvious for years and is no longer even denied. Pictures of him taking crack cocaine and spending time with prostitutes and girls of questionable age are readily available for casual viewing. Available too are the details of Hunter's income from oligarchs and kleptocrats, including the receipt for the purchase of a sports car with a cash transfer from a Kazakh oligarch. What sort of society accepts the rule of oligarchs, kleptocrats and kakocrats? The British archipelago has no meaningful border with the European mainland and thereby the rest of the world. When any of us asks just who it is that's being allowed in by the thousands and then by the millions, we're called racists and bigots. Back in 1997, liar Prime Minister Tony Blair proudly declared he and his ilk would rub Britain's noses in diversity, and so they did. The twisted, parasitic, zombie ideology of inclusivity, tolerance and diversity is inclusive and tolerant of all manner of things, right enough, except the lives and Christian faith that underpinned these islands for 2,000 years. Be caught professing that Christian faith, wearing a cross maybe, or otherwise making plain belief in Jesus Christ, among all the other faiths determinedly tolerated, and prepared to be mocked, ridiculed and all but excluded from so-called liberal society. I've no problem, not at all and quite the contrary, with any and all who declare love of God, but I have a big problem with those in our establishment who would make trouble only for Christians. I have a major problem too with those still demeaning women who choose to raise families at home instead of entering the jobs market. Who in their right mind dismisses full-time mothers as second-class citizens? Liberals do, as it turns out. Millions know what works for men, women and children, but have stood by while the stuff of honourable lives is cynically undermined. Too many are silenced while British culture and history are derided as a source of nothing but shame. We've let others make our civilization look like a brownfield site littered with rubble. No wonder others make their way here from one country after another, destabilised or destroyed by NATO and the West, which is to say by the military-industrial complex. No wonder they come when they see a place advertising itself as devoid of any identity, a vacant lot where the powers that be say anything goes and everything is free because it's already been paid for with citizens' taxes. Those arriving have no such doubts about identity and culture and faith, certain as they are about who they are, what family means, what men and women are, how they want their children raised, what God they worship. If national identity and culture are defensive weapons against all comers, then our leaders long ago embarked upon unilateral disarmament. Unilateral disarmament is always wrong. On behalf of the millions, but without asking us, a generation of political puppets, servants of the markets and unelected, unaccountable transnational entities has laid low our culture, those ideas that gave meaning to what it has meant to be British, what it has meant to be North American. We have an establishment, or powers that be, or whatever, that wishes this country was a very different place and that we, the resident population, were a very different people. They wish we were a little people, content to live small, cold, impoverished lives devoid of aspiration. They wish we were submissive and dependent. They wish there weren't so many always asking questions. They wish we would just believe what they tell us and do what we're told. They wish we would say goodbye to farmers of meat and hello to processed, genetically modified plants and insects. They wish we didn't want the freedom of the open road and reliable cars, that we were content to remain on this island and look no further afield for holidays or anything else, indeed to look no further than 15-minute ghettos. They wish we would accept our children belong to them, to the state and its myrmidons, and not to us, their parents. They wish this country and this people were as they like to imagine us being. But wishing doesn't make it so, thank God. Instead of just wishing, the powers that be are gaslighting us instead, telling us we're wrong on so many levels and ignorant, and daring us to say otherwise. 3 years ago, we were shut in our homes for 23 hours a day by puppets who said the science demanded as much. Millions knew it was nonsense. Worse, that doing so would cause immeasurable, unconscionable harm to young and old alike. But the millions stayed in their homes anyway, cowed into submission by baying about granny killing and COVIDiots. This month, the Telegraph newspaper carried a front-page story headlined, "Lockdown harmed emotional development of almost half of children." Stop for a minute to think about that. Harmed my children, your children. Millions of us refused the injections of gene therapies marketed as vaccines and were vilified, ridiculed, sacked, excluded and bullied in return. Now we're prevented from knowing how many people were killed or injured. Those of us demanding answers to questions about harms caused, about persistent increases in all-cause mortality all over the injected world, receive no answers, just more attempts to have us go away and forget. The powers that be wish we were the sort of people who would take no for an answer, that we had the memories of goldfish. But wishing doesn't make it so. Early in the horror show of lockdown and jabs, I said, and more than once, that our children must be left alone. Leave the children alone, I said, almost as a mantra. But more troubling by far, even more troubling than the injecting of millions of youngsters with experimental products, has been the assault upon children's sense of self in the form of a whispering campaign to have them doubt the biological facts of their own existence. What kind of society are we here in Britain if we, the parents, stand by while children, anyone's children, are ushered onto pathways leading to mutilation and lives of sexless sterility? In the name of education, some teachers, without the knowledge, far less the consent of parents, whisper in the ears of little boys the thought they might really be little girls, that little girls might really be little boys. They show them the sort of stuff we used to put X certificates on at the movies, the sort of stuff you used to have to pay to see in specialist cinemas. By so doing, by sowing doubt about and glamorising the choices that previously existed only on the outer edges of the spectrum, they condemn generations to the lives of the castrati and the barren. Even now, the casualties are clamouring for help, for apology, for compensation, just for recognition. Those whose bodies have been hollowed out, they'll be lining up for years to come. The time is now to decide what kind of society we are. Have you heard the one about Schrodinger's cat? The notion of a cat shut in a box with a vial of poison that may or may not have killed it. The only way to find out is to open the box. Until that moment, according to the notion, the cat must be both alive and dead at the same time. I say we are living in Schrodinger's Britain. In Schrodinger's Britain, the Britain of before is both alive and dead. We must open the box and see. I say too that in the end, all we have to fear is a handful of old men with noodle arms and bloated guts. I say that handful could swiftly be chased out of sight by a few good men. Easily those desiccated ghouls would be chased out of our lives, never to return. Trailing in their wake would be the corrupting filth they want children to read, the toxic garbage they want us to eat, the lesser lives they would have us lead. By some estimates, the song most listened to all over the West in the last couple of days is a protest ballad by a young American farmer, Oliver Anthony. Quote, "It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me and people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is, oh it is. Lord knows they all just want to have control. Want to know what you think, want to know what you do." It's a protest song worth listening to over and over. Take heart, whoever and wherever you are. We're not just millions, we're billions, and we all know what we know, and we all think what we think. All that's left is to act on it. The world in which they would have us live is only make-believe, the fantasy of bitter old men. Quote, young men are putting themselves 6 feet in the ground because all this damn country does is keep on kicking them down. And so it is, and so it will be until we rise. Here's the thing, they call it Agenda 2030 and ESG and equity and inclusion, tolerance and diversity. I'm here to tell you it's anti-human, anti-life, anti-us. Never forget, we are the problem they want to solve. We are the carbon they want to reduce to zero. If you haven't already, wise up.